Alright, so this is Cleanup Master, and before we start, I just wanted to mention that this toolbar is completely adjustable in size, and you can dock it three ways. As a box, like this, or as a row horizontally, where you can put below your comp viewer, for example, and you can even come here to panel group settings and choose small tabs. So it takes a little bit less real estate. And you can also dock it the way I like to dock it, as a column on the left hand side like this. One other important thing to mention is that some of the buttons, they have more than one function. And you can just check the tooltips to remember what the other functions are. And for example, on this one here, we have two more functions, one holding Option Alt and the other one holding Command or Control. So if you're ever lost and don't remember what exactly each button do, you can always rely on the tooltips to have some hints at least for each of the functions. So the main idea behind this script is reducing the amount of layers and give you the possibility to change everything in one go. So for example, if in parts of my animation I needed to change the whole torso with arms and the head at the same time, I just come here, select all the points and change everything in one go. If you have layers, you need to go like for each layer and change each different shape separately, which is a pain. So that's one of the many advantages of working like this. But the problem is we're essentially trading layers for shape groups. But that's the reason we have the visibility functions over here. What they allow you to do is to focus on specific parts of your character and reduce the clutter in your comp viewer. So you can focus, for example, if I'm just cleaning up the arm, or if it's hard for me to select parts of the character, I can just come here to the comp viewer, select the points and click on solo. And when I do this, I can focus on this specific part of the character and just come here and modify the way I want without touching the other points. Or I can use this just to make easy to make the selection, and then we can use the restore visibility here to bring everything back again, but the selections are still here. So I can just come here, double click, and then change the anchor point and change things with the reference of the rest of the character. And the hide button is just the opposite of the solo button. So if I just don't want the legs here, just select the legs and just hide them. Or for example, it's hard to select just the left arm here because it's overlapping with the torso or something. And then I just solo it and I don't want the torso. I just come to the hide button and that's hidden. And again, I can focus on just this part of the character. The linking section basically deals with node creation and parenting. So you can parent shape groups to nodes, create nodes to follow points, and trace paths. So let's focus on create nodes follow points for now. This is very similar to the traditional create nodes to follow points, but it has a few differences. The first one is that it can create nodes for selected points only. So if I select a point here, for example, in the head, and hit the button, it's just gonna create a node for this point only. And it also follows the rotation of the points. So if I get the points handles and I change the handles, the node will rotate accordingly. If you just want the node to follow but not rotate, you can just come back here and hold Option or Alt and press the button, and it will create the same node, but this time, if I change the handles, it's just gonna follow without rotating with the point. Another thing worth mentioning is that under the hood of this function here is a very big difference in the way it links to the shape groups. In the original script, the node is linked to the index of the shape group. So if you change order here, you break the connection. With Cleanup Master, it's linking to the names. So if I change the head stacking order here, it's not gonna break the connections. It's just gonna keep working normally. Another important thing to note is that for every node created, we have a point index slider. This is for situations where you decide to delete a point and your node is going to jump to another point because now the index of the points changed. To change the node back to the original position, which was here, you can just change the index here to say 0, and it's going to sit on top of the same point as it was before. The tracePath function is also similar to the traditional tracePath with a few key differences. The same thing as with the create nulls follow points, it also links to names, so you can change the stacking order if you need to. This function is very useful when you want to have something going around a shape, or if you want to attach something to a place where there's no points and you don't want to create one. So let's go ahead and create one null. And another difference is that instead of a progress from 0 to 100, this function uses an angle control. So you can precisely control how many times you want your node to go around your shape. So if I just change the angle control here, you can see that you can go around as many times and you can stop wherever you want, which is different for the original one where you go from 0 to 100, and then for looping around is a bit of a tricky situation. So let's go ahead and position the node, for example, here. And if you run the animation, you can see that the node is attaching kind of around the area where we originally put it. It's not as precise as attaching to points, but that could be something you want, or that could be something that you're fine with. There are many situations where this could be really useful. The last function in the linking group is the parent shape group to null. One of the main issues of working with shape groups is that you lose the ability to use the parent to link layers to nulls and attach stuff to your character, for example. But this function solves this issue. So let's go ahead and create a point here. For example, on the head, I'll create a null. So the null will follow the animation. So let's draw a rough shape here on the same layer to demonstrate what's possible. This shape is inside the same shape layer here, so we still have only one layer, and you can see shape 1 here. We can use the renamer to rename it. I'll talk about the renamer soon, but let's use the renamer here, and then we call it hair, so it's hair here. And if we run the animation, of course it's not gonna follow because we didn't add any keyframes, and it's gonna just stay in position. But we can use the animation of the head because you now have the null that's following the animation, and we can just attach the hair. We can select it here, or you can select it on the comp viewer. We can select a point, and then we go here on the parent shape group to null, press the button, and it's gonna show a list of null objects, and in this case is the character head, so that's fine. Let's press OK, and now if we run the animation, the shape is following the head. Let's go to the other tools section, and let's start with this button here, which is the renamer/selector. I'll talk about the renamer first. So the renamer is basically a tidying up function to put order to the mess, and saves you from coming down to the timeline and trying to figure out which shape group relates to a specific path in the comp viewer. So if you just select a point here and press rename, you can just type the name, right? Like, it is just gonna rename down here in the timeline. And you can just keep going and rename everything until you have all your shape groups renamed. Another nice thing about the renamer is that if you select more than one shape at the same time, for example, let's select everything here, and if we give just a name, for example, body, and press enter, it's just gonna name every single shape body, but then it's gonna append a number, and that's really useful when you have lots of the same objects in the scene. But this tool does way more than that. Let's go to this other comp here where I prepared an animation, and here I made sure to add a bunch of stuff so we can see all the power in action. So we have detail masks, we have shade groups, we have a null, we have inverted opacity pairs here, everything for the right leg, so you can see how the renamer scans the whole project and make sure that everything stays tidy and organized. So make sure every time you rename your shape group, use the rename tool so you avoid breaking links and you keep everything organized. So let's go ahead and select the right leg here and use the renamer. So instead of right leg, let's call it like right calf. So the animation is still working, the null is in place, everything has been renamed, even the layer names, expressions, and the inverted opacity pairs, the original shape group name. So everything gets renamed as long as you use the renamer tool to rename your shape groups. So make sure this is part of your workflow and everything will stay organized and nicely named like this. So let's talk about the other function in this button here, which is the selector. If you hold Option or Alt when you press it, so let's just select something in the character here. We can select the leg as well. And if you hold Option or Alt and press the button, it's gonna select, you can't see anything here because it's selecting inside the shape layer. So if you double tap S, it's gonna show only the keyframed properties and the path property related to the selection you have here. So that's a really nice way to isolate whatever you're working with here in the timeline and see all the keyframes related to them. If, for example, you have a keyframe in the fill, for example, if you run the same selection again, select, and then double tap S, now the fill property will appear here because the color has keyframes. So it makes it really easy to isolate things and see what's happening with those shapes in the timeline. For changing the stacking order of elements, we have this button here. Normally, working with layers, you just split layers, put things on top, things behind. With Cleanup Master and this workflow, we can use this button here. This essentially creates a clone of the selected shape or layer, which I call inverted opacity pair, and I'll show how it works. So for example, we have this animation here, and you can see that the left arm here, when it's rotating, it should go behind straight away. So we can fix this by just using and clicking on this button once, and I'll show on the timeline here what happens. So we have all the animation, and let's review the shapes here. I'll select the left arm. So let's go to a position where it's obvious what's happening, and let me hide the lines so it's easy to see. So we have the left arm here, it's already selected. So if we press the button now, it's just instantly gonna go behind. And if you look here, what happened is that it created a shape group with the inverted opacity name. This is a perfect clone of the left arm over here. And this works by creating opacity keyframes and inverting the opacity between the two. So if we keep going ahead, and now the left arm should be on top. So if we just come here and press it again, that's just gonna create another keyframe here and revert back to the top copy. So you can just go ahead and work on the other arm. So the other arm should be behind here. So let's review, select here and set it behind. And the legs should be, this one here should be here already. So let's make it behind. And then it's sitting on top of the back arm here. So let's just move the right leg on top of the left arm here to adjust the stacking order, because that's something you need to keep an eye out for, because by default, the inverted opacity pairs is going to be created behind all the other shape groups. And sometimes that's not exactly what you need. And maybe you need to change the stacking order, and you can just move it and put it wherever you want, including on the top if needed. But what happens if I just delete this inverted opacity pair here? As we still have the opacity keyframes, the other leg's gonna start disappearing and, well, doing whatever the keyframes are telling it to do. So let's undo it. There's a way to remove the inverted opacity pair and restore the original opacity. So you can just select the inverted opacity pair here, or you can just select the shape here and you hold Option, Alt, and press it. So now the clone is gone and the opacity is back to normal again. What if I just want to hide the shape that I'm not using anymore? For that, you can just come here, select the shape, and then you come here to the button, hold Command or Control and press it. And it's gonna automatically create opacity keyframes for that shape. It's important to note that this function also works for layers. So for example, let's create some really simple shapes here on different layers. And let's change the color so you can see that working. So we have basically two layers here, two shape layers on top of each other. That works for any type of layer, but let's just use these two as an example. So if I want to put this layer behind the other one, I can just come here and press a button. It's just gonna do the same thing, putting the clone behind everything. And if I keep pressing this button, it's just gonna be switching between the copies with opacity keyframes. So even if you want to use more layers, you don't need to split anything anymore. The copy-paste shape state function is very straightforward but extremely useful. As the name implies, you can just select any shape at any point in time, copy it, and then paste it. So let's see how it works. For example, we have the animation here completely done, but I'll just demonstrate copying some shapes and pasting at other points in the animation so you can see. You can select as many shapes as you want. So for example, if I just copy the whole pose, I can just come to the button, press it, just copy it. And if I just move the timeline and just come to another position here, for example, and then I just hold Option and press the button again, it's just gonna paste the pose to this point in the timeline. So you have this pose being copied here. Let me undo it and let's try it again with just a few shapes. So let's get the leg here. So see where the leg is, and I'll do the same thing on the same frame. So if I just come here and just paste it, you see that the leg is now the same as we have on this frame here. So that's very straightforward, very simple, but really powerful. Another very straightforward function is the collapse point. This is basically an aligning tool to make sure points are exactly on top of each other. In situations where you're cleaning up, most often than not, you need those points to be perfectly aligned. And then we spend some time trying to align them by hand, and well, it works, usually. But this function makes this job really quick and precise. I'll keep them separate so you can see how it works. So if I just select both points and press the button, it's going to essentially average the position of those points and make sure they are exactly on top of each other. You can do it with as many points as you want. So just to demonstrate, I'll just select a few points here and then press the button again. They all come to the center. So let's undo it. If you want to include the handles and collapse everything, you can just hold Option or Alt and press the button again, and every handle will also be collapsed. Another very simple but very useful function is the add keyframes. This one simply adds keyframes to every single path property and saves you from coming here and using the search bar or trying to find the path property in the timeline. So if I just select the layer and press a button, it's going to create a keyframe for every single path property, but it also works with selections in the comp viewer. So if I want to add keyframes just for these two shapes here, I just hold Option or Alt, and then it's going to create keyframes for only the selected shapes. This is a big one, and it completely changes the way we deal with points in After Effects. That's the delete points and keep animation. So let me explain. We have this animation here, and the normal behavior in After Effects is that if at this point here I want to delete those points because my character is very simple and I just need those points to describe this shape, but actually my character is very simple and I don't want those points for the rest of the animation. So if I just come here and delete the points, I'm going to receive this warning, which is the warning that says how After Effects deals with point deletion. So if I press OK, it's going to essentially wipe out the whole animation because all those points are gone now forever. So essentially you can't delete points in After Effects because otherwise you just ruin your whole animation. So let's just undo it and let me show you what happens when we use this function here. So let's go to the right frame where the mouth completely closes, and then if we use this button here, the points are deleted, and if I scroll back, the animation stays intact. And from this moment on, we don't have those points anymore. The shape to mask is another very useful function. Let's see what it does. So I have the character here, and if I just select a point in a shape and press a button, it's going to create another shape layer with a mask that has the same name as the selected shape, which is the head, and the mask is going to replicate whatever the head does. So if we come here to the character and change the head here, we go to the mask, and you can see that the mask also changed accordingly. Let's undo it. So let's draw something inside the shape here so you can see it working. As you can see, the shape's being cropped by the mask, but of course it's not following the animation. So we need to create a null as well. So let's select the point, let's create a null. So that's a null here. I can go inside the mask, select the shape that's inside, and then I can link the shape group to the null. So that's the head. Okay. And when I play, now it's following the animation and being cropped by the shape. Shapes to masks can also be used to create subtract masks. So let's see how that works. I'll just draw a random shape here. So let's move it behind the character. And now let me select the leg, and holding Option or Alt, I press a button, and it's gonna give me this dialog where I can select the target layer. It can be any layer, and in this case, I'll select shape layer 1, which is the layer we just drew. So if we press OK, that's gonna create inside the shape layer a mask for each of the selected shapes. So if I just hide the character now, and let's make it transparent, you can see that the layer is being cut by the shapes. So if I run the animation here, and no matter how I move the layer, the masks will always stay in place. This button here is for creating shade groups. Think of shade groups as pre-comping shape groups together, so you can apply shading. Let's see how it works. So let's select the legs, and if we create a shade group, what happens is that another shape layer is created with just those selected shapes. So if I solo it, you can see them here. And we can go ahead and apply anything, for example, a fill, and then maybe we apply a layer style as well, and maybe an inner glow or something. And let's change the settings so you can see it properly. So that's basically what it does. So shade groups are supposed to be the last step in the process. As soon as you start separating those shapes, you have to deal with some overlapping issues and other comping problems. So for example here, we need the arm to be on top of the leg. So let's go to a position where it's easier to select. So we can select the arm here, and then we can use the masks. So if I just create a subtract mask, holding Option, it's gonna ask for the target layer, so that's the leg, and I hit OK. And then now the arm is cutting the leg. So at this point, depending on the complexity of your character, how much overlap you have, sometimes you have to be creative with solutions and problem solving. But that's very useful to get some complex shading in no time. The zero transforms function is applied to all the other functions by default, but I decided to leave it separate here in case you need to use it for something else. This solves one of the most annoying problems when you import shapes from outside of After Effects, and sometimes they come with the transform not zeroed. So you can see that all the shapes here, they are not zeroed. They all have different transform positions. So I can zero just the selected shape. If I select shape 5 here, for example, and press a button, it's gonna zero and keep everything in place, and the other ones are still not zeroed. If I want to zero the whole layer, I just have to, well, select the layer and apply the function. So it's gonna zero every single shape group position for the whole layer, while keeping everything in the same position here. Last but not least, we have the Remove Expressions from Selection button. This is mostly a tidying up function to remove expressions that you don't need anymore, or to fix problems when you break connections. So for example, here we have the character with some goggles running, and it's attached to a null. So if for some reason I don't want the parenting anymore and I just come here and delete the null, we're gonna have some broken expressions. So we can just come here to the timeline and select the goggle, or we can just select it over here in the comp viewer, and we just press the Remove Expressions from Selection. That's gonna remove expression only from the selected shapes, so everything else is kept intact, but you solve the problems, and then you can go ahead and reposition things where you want them to be without the expressions.